86.
Yes. How old did you think you were?
I didn't know whether I was going that way or this way.
What did you think you were doing?
I thought I was going in between.
Rita Houston is in studio today with Vancouver author Cathie Borrie, recording the words of Cathie's mother, Joan. Joan lived with Alzheimer's for 7 years. Cathie was her principal caregiver. As her mother lost cognitive ability, the manner in which she spoke changed. Joan began speaking poetically. Cathie recorded her and took notes. Rita Houston reads Joan Borrie's words.
Will there be more stories?
Oh, yes. A lot more stories.
Through a long season of reading, writing, and remembering, Cathie wrote the long hello for her mother. In the book, Cathie shares her life journey memories with Joan Borrie.
I think probably she would be very clear that she would want people to respect and honor the ongoing and enduring spirit and soul of her humanity, that continues right the way through to the last breath, and that's what people should be doing when they're caregiving other people, is to recognize that no matter what changes, and if that person doesn't recognize you or they don't remember things, there's still an enduring human spirit that deserves to be honored and celebrated.
Now, Cathie, was your mom always poetic before the diagnosis?
She wasn't poetic at all. And, I was expecting this slow descent into nothingness, and in fact, the opposite happened, and it took me by complete surprise. I was just trying to think about the first time it happened, and I remember we were in this cafeteria in a mall, and it was a very depressing place. It was full of wheelchairs and walkers, and we used to go in all the time. And I was feeling quite down about everything, really. And I wanted to ask her advice about something, and I wasn't sure if she still had the capacity to answer my questions in the way that she'd done so well before. But I thought, well, I've got nothing to lose, I might as well ask. So I said to her, "Mom, what do you do if you love somebody but he doesn't love you?" And without skipping a beat, she says, "Go find someone else." And it was so funny, but it was also very good advice. So I just kept going, and I wrote it down on a napkin. I still have the white coffee stained napkin in my files. And I think it was that moment where I thought, there's more going on here than I thought and that I was expecting, and that I'm doing her a disservice by having limiting expectations. And after that, I started to record our conversations, and she just continued to amaze me. I think I'm more concentrated, and I sort of am. It's become part of me. Something has gone. Something bad has gone. I think we reached the limit of our soul of misery, and we're now poof. And we're just doing the best we can. We're not feeling like that. We just do. We just are. I think that's the way it is.
Sunshine, my only sunshine, you make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love thee. Please don't take my sunshine away.
She was very musical. She taught piano. She played piano. She probably could have been really quite well known, but she was stage shy and she didn't want to do it. But she was performing at age 6. Perfect pitch, beautiful singer. We used to sing together all the time. She had some other creative interests like gardening and things like that, but I'd say that the music was most important to her, and we used that all the way through her illness, playing songs or singing ad lib all the time. We used to have this little game where I would sing the first note and then she would try to guess what it was, and she guessed what it was every single time. And so that carried us through in a big way. One of the things she loved greatly were birds, and we had bird feeders outside the balcony in her condominium, and it took up a lot of our attention. And one day she was looking and she said, said, this is out of the book because I put her quotes together. Listen, a bird. I said, what are the birds saying? They're chirping. In a language? In their language. In an upside down language. So I'm not smart enough to understand what she meant, but she knew what she meant.
Of course she did.
You know, it's like reading poetry. You don't always get it, but the answers are there.
Right. Now, there are discussions in the book, and you talk about birds and natural things and ocean scenes. Talk about her love of nature expressed through the book.
She did. She lived by the sea, and she loved the ocean. She was a boater. She fished, which was quite unusual for a woman of her generation to get up in the morning and go out fishing alone, come back with salmon for dinner. But she loved the sea, and those sorts of things sustained both of us throughout her illness. We were lucky enough that she lived in a place where we had a view of the ocean, and we would spend hours and hours watching the tugs come in and the freighters. We had a marine radio, so we would listen to the pilots chatting to each other.
Right.
And so we were able to tap into what had been important to her in her earlier life. And those sorts of things like the ocean and the sea and boats, you don't have to have a huge memory to know that you love those things. So they endure.
Tell me what you learned about yourself as you were caring for your mom and as you were hearing these things that she was saying.
I learned that I didn't have enough patience and that I needed to be much more patient or I would miss all these beautiful words. And I think what happens is when you keep interrupting and correcting and interjecting and reorienting, you miss what the person is going to say. So I had to learn, and I'm still having to learn this, going from being quite an outgoing, active person to having to really sit back and keep my mouth closed and listen and ask questions. And we could do that all the way through. So I certainly learned that I had to do that better. I also learned that there was in me a poetic voice that I had not known. And that voice came out in the form of a lyrical memoir. And I had always wanted to write, but I didn't know if I really could or what I would write about. And that she gave me that opportunity to write about our experience together. So
it's very interesting that you and I have a similar experience where I did not know I had a poetic voice until I saw my dad's art. And viewing the art caused me to want to express myself as well. So I think something inside him, something inside her, touched your spirit and you had to express as well. Maybe.
That's right.
Tell me about her behavior while you were talking with her, while you were visiting with her. Do you think the expression helped to calm her in any way or change her demeanor or behavior?
Well, I think one of the things that really made a difference to our times together, because I was with her all the time, and those hours, they're long days for both of us, was that when I decided I would start to tape her, she loved that. And I mean, who wouldn't love being taped? Because it means you're important and that what you say is worthwhile. So I'd get the tape recorder out and say, well, I'd like to tape you if that's all right. And she would just, sit up, and it gave her value. So that whole process and experience not only added quality to our days, but gave her a feeling of self-confidence that I think she would not have had otherwise. What people tend to do is ignore people who have Alzheimer's or put them in a corner in front of the TV, useless things, instead of listening and asking. We had this little, almost a rhythmic call and response, like choirs in gospel, where I'd say, which do you like better, the day or the night? The night, because I can hide. And we would use this over and over again, because anybody can answer because rather than why or what. Because means they have the answer. So whatever she said was right.
You said something very important a minute ago, and that is you validated her by listening to her. You showed her that she was important enough to be listened to be paid attention to. And I think that helps to shore up the person. It helps to shore up the self. And I think this is what creative arts expressive arts do for folks.
So do I, yes.
What would you tell other caregivers that are going through or walking down this road with their loved one perhaps, to sort of buoy them up and shore them up along these lines?
I'd say the best advice I would say is to stop trying to make things how they used to be and how you want them to be. I'll never forget and I made a lot of mistakes before I understood how to do it in a better way, but I remember driving along the street and there'd been a drugstore on the corner. And she said, "Look at that wonderful new drugstore." And this was early on. And I said, "No, that's been there for 20 years. And I thought I had this responsibility to reorient her. Well, nothing could be more foolish. She was crestfallen that she had gotten that wrong. And I think that was one of the last times I made that really silly mistake. So the best advice, I think, is to follow instead of lead. It's a dance, follow. And you have to be quiet, and you have to wait, and you have to listen in order to follow properly. Follow, not lead, and if they say that's a new drugstore, it's a new drugstore.
Right.
If they say there's somebody in the room, there's somebody in the room. How would I know there wasn't? So that's what works. And the other thing, Daniel, I was going to say, it's easier. It just gets caregiving, it gives caregiving a focus, and caregiving is easier when you actually do that instead of fighting.
That's right. It validates both the caregiver and the cared for.
Right.